It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And a big shout out as well to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast in Canada, the U.S., or beyond. It is great to have you a part of the RealAg community. Well, July just keeps on marching on, and it's already another Monday here. Hopefully you had yourself a great weekend and everything went well. I'm broadcasting actually today from Winnipeg, Manitoba. So in the land of humidity and very large mosquitoes. But actually it's a little cooler here. It was much warmer on the weekend in southern Alberta than it is here in the first part of the week in Manitoba. But we'll take it. And lots happening in the world of agriculture this week. And we're going to have a great show for you here today on Agronomic Monday. Peter Johnson will be here. And Peter are going to talk about a number of different issues. I want to ask him a couple things outside of like, hey, how crops and all that kind of stuff. What's going on in France with some of the pushback from farmers? And I want to talk about this glyphosate study that came out the end of last week. We talked about it on Friday's panel. I want to get Pete's perspective on it as well in terms of what would happen if farmers did not have glyphosate as a tool. And glyphosate is not the be-all, end-all, but it is a tool. And we are hanging by a thread with some of these tools, and you can't just take them away because it's got big, big consequences, and the consequences are bigger than the problem you're trying to solve in the first place. That's looking at you, environmentalist activists that are pushing this kind of stuff. So new report out saying there's big-time environmental consequences for taking glyphosate off the market. Pete will talk about that. We've also got Sara Meidlinger. She'll be with us here from Pride Seeds in a product spotlight. So looking forward to talking to Pride Seeds, longtime supporters of RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com. And then we'll also hear a Canola School episode with Chris Manchur. He is with the Canola Council of Canada. And some pretty neat stuff. Kelvin's going to ask him about some RNAi technology that may help us in a couple areas in the future when it comes to fighting off pests and diseases. Very, very cool stuff indeed. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147, or we are Real Agriculture across a ton of social media platforms. Yes, we've even added threads. We've added threads because, like I keep on saying, we needed another social media platform. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well. I'm on Threads as well. Shaun Haney, very, very creative name. Follow me there as well. We got some feedback from the audience. An email here from Chuck. Now, I think Chuck went back and he was listening to our BSE special podcast that we put out the week on the anniversary of BSE. Chuck says, as bad as it was, the Alberta government and Ag Minister got on the job and opened their bank account, got industry invested and listened to radical ideas like the set-aside program. Allowed cattle to trade through auctions and livestock dealers and had big payments up to $450 a head over ticket value. I saw major packers that had cattle on feed receive payments. In some cases, even covered out of province inventory if owned by Alberta residents. As tough as it was, the Premier Ralph and his cabinet saved our residents a lot of money, and we never slaughtered and didn't bury any cattle as happened in Saskatchewan during the hoof and mouth. Thank you for all the industry good work your company does. Appreciate that email, Chuck. Appreciate it very, very much. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Peter Johnson right after this.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. enhanced weed control, and a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGly.ca.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit CanolaSchool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Let's bring him in. Peter Johnson. Hey, Pete, how are you doing on this Monday?
I'm doing awesome, thanks, Shaun. Finally looks like we're going to have a few dry days. Late last week, for many of us, the skies have opened up. And, of course, this is always the way it happens. The first combines go to the field to start combining winter wheat, and the weather turns south. So it looks like we might get a few days, fingers crossed. And Johnson might even, if the weather holds and I can get the combine ready to go, we might be in the field by Friday or Saturday. So here's hoping that we get there.
What are some of those early yield monitor photos saying that people have been sending to you?
Shaun, it really is a bit of a dog's breakfast because of the weather that we've had up to this point. But so far, I would say winter barley is sort of a solid average. Now, I got to be careful with that because I actually had a grower that sent me a picture of his yield monitor where he doubled up the fertilizer, the biodigestate, right? The biodigestate on the winter barley, 215 bushels per acre of barley on the yield, and a calibrated yield monitor. You just go, is that even possible?
Wow.
So there's some awesome yields out there. And the winter canola has just been blowing people away. I think the lowest yield I've heard on winter canola was 60 bushels per acre, up to about, I think the high has been 75 or 78 bushels per acre. So there is going to be a ton more interest in winter canola. This variety Mercedes is changing the landscape for winter canola in Ontario. The big problem, of course, is that you had to order the seed by June the 15th. So now we get the results and everybody wants more, and we're sort of out of luck for next year. But wow, that's just blow you away. The winter barley on average looks like a solid average crop. The winter wheat crop is looking variable, but there's some good yields out there. I've heard some 105, some 110s. The lowest I've heard is 65. That's pretty disappointing. But most are kind of running in that 80 to 100 or just over 100. So not a record by any stretch, but given how dry it was through much of the grain fill period, if we can break 100, that's still pretty solid.
Agronomically speaking, how many acres could the canola crop be in Ontario? Because what is it now, like 80,000, something like that?
Well, I don't even think I think it's closer to 8,000, Shaun, or 15,000. I don't think
it's
we're
that low
anywhere close. Yeah, for winter canola.
Oh, sorry.
I
was talking the general canola number because I think it's between 40 and 80, right?
Yeah, so that's right. I think it's a 60 or 65 when you look at spring canola. But spring canola, we continue to fight with things like Swede midge, and we still have, just like Western Canada, the flea beetle problem. So there's lots of challenges with spring canola in Ontario. Winter canola is what we're harvesting right now.
Yeah.
And winter canola, just because of so far, and of course things can always evolve, but winter canola comes up in the fall, and the flea beetles don't seem to bother it very much in the fall. Swede midge doesn't come in till the winter canola, like it's ahead of it. So we miss all these problems, and there's still a few issues, but the biggest issue, we get back to white mold and things like that. So when you say how many acres could it be, well, I actually think if we could get a fourth crop in the rotation, that winter canola could rival winter wheat acres.
Wow.
And it's going to take a while to, yeah, I know. But man, if we could get 75 bushel winter canola, that's very profitable. If we can add a fourth crop into the rotation that's profitable, that spreads the workload out. So now we're seeding it ahead of winter wheat and we're harvesting it ahead of winter wheat. And it gives us the opportunity then to plant winter wheat after the canola on time, or vice versa. We figure out how that rotation works. I'm really excited about winter canola. Now, there's so many what ifs, right, Shaun? We could get rid of the blackleg problems, although, most of the varieties have good blackleg tolerance, but diseases evolve over time. There's lots of things that could happen. Back in the 80s, we thought winter canola was going to just take the world by storm here in Ontario, and blackleg just put a total stop to that.
Next you'll want to be growing lentils. Like, stick with your own crops.
We won't grow lentils, Shaun. We won't. The ascocite is going to wipe us out. Okay, like the lentils are not an Ontario crop, but winter canola, not spring canola.
Yeah.
Like spring canola, we've had it forever. That as you said, 40 to 80, mostly 60, 65,000 acres, something like that. Okay. On spring canola it just doesn't. It's got too many hurdles for us to jump. Winter canola, I don't know. I think it has some amazing potential, although it's the Cinderella crop right now, and everything works really well the first few times you grow it until the wheels fall off. So the wheels could still fall off.
Well, it was sort of like soybeans in Manitoba, right? It was like a Cinderella crop. Everybody said this is easy to grow. What's the big deal? And then we had a couple of years of really, really poor, uncooperative weather. And, you can only grow 15 bushel soybeans for so long before you're like, maybe we shouldn't be growing soybeans in this area. And now, hey, look, soybean acres are right after last year's conditions. Soybean acres are back up in Manitoba. So, like, these crops that play, they're the fringe crops for the area, they get put in and taken out of the rotation on a regular basis based on and weather being a big part of it. Obviously, markets factor in, but the weather is a big play here. There's weather patterns over a couple-year period that'll push a crop out of an area that it's not typically commonly grown in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The game changer, though, with winter canola, Shaun, is the variety Mercedes. And the fact that it won't bolt in the fall. And so the big hang up before with winter canola was you planted it and you needed to plant it early to get enough size to the plant that it would survive the winter. But then if you had an open fall, the stupid thing would get too mature and start to bolt, and then it died over winter. And it's not cheap seed. With Mercedes, it never bolts in the fall. They put day length sensitivity into that variety. They put vernalization, the same as winter wheat. It needs that cold period before it will bolt. So it doesn't bolt in the fall. And so now we can plant it early and get the big plant. And there's still a few ramifications there. I mean, I'm making it sound easier or more simple than it is. But this variety actually really changes the waterfront in terms of canola in Ontario, winter canola in Ontario. So I'm not sure what wheels will fall off, but man, right now you would look at that crop and say, this, if it keeps going the way it is, this could become a big deal in Ontario.
Well, I'll tell you what's becoming a really big deal. What's going on over there in France? Now, this has a lot to do with ag policy, my understanding, but a lot of push to try to is the best way to describe it, convert more farms to organic? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, so there's a huge push, and the whole EU is leaning that way, but France seems to be at the head of the movement, if you will. And man, it is just really a challenge, because when you take away all the tools, I had a great conversation at a 50th wedding anniversary on Sunday with some people, and it's like, well, commercial fertilizer is bad. Well, wait a minute. If I take those nutrients off the field, I have to replace them somehow, and so there just isn't enough organic amendments. There's not enough manure. There's not enough biodigestate. They're just like, I can't do it without commercial fertilizer. It's like your bank account. You keep withdrawing. Pretty soon there's nothing to withdraw. And it's the same thing when it comes to pesticides and this whole movement towards less pesticides. There's lots of, and I don't read French. I count on Terry Daynard because he reads French and he tweets out, you got to get your information somehow, Shaun. But he kind of reads the French press, and some of the French farmers are totally up in arms because their yields are dropping by at least a third, sometimes as much as by 60%. And come to Ontario, man, if you can't control glyphosate-resistant fleabane, and I know I'm talking about resistant weeds now, but that's sort of the game you get playing if we're back to tillage to try to do all of those things, then that's very, challenging from a soil health standpoint, from a soil carbon standpoint. There's just so many things that change. And if organics really would feed the world, then we wouldn't have needed to go to commercial fertilizer and pesticides to get where we are today. Yeah. And I'm not against organics. It's all good, but man, you got to be realistic. And if you go down that road, if you take away our pesticides and our fertilizers, then the answer is pretty clear. You reduce food production by at least 1/3. And if you take away a third of the production on the best ground in the world, man, she's going to go south fast.
Well, Pete, I said last week that, where I am in southern Alberta, okay, if we were tilling, I could not imagine the soil erosion that would be going on because we haven't had much of a crop because there's been a drought. And then you add like summer following to that. Oh my goodness. It's like the 1930s. The air would be black. And that's all good topsoil, what topsoil we have, up in the air and going to Saskatchewan. It would be unreal. I couldn't even imagine it. So this is
so Shaun,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I was just going to say, it's not just to Saskatchewan. If it went to Saskatchewan, they could use it. Man, if you go back to the Dust Bowls, the dirt was blowing from Alberta to downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
Like it was that bad. And they had that in Kansas this year. Kansas was under drought for 5 years. And even where they didn't till, they had dust storms because there was so little crop, so little residue there to keep that soil in place. And they had some extremely strong winds, and they just essentially whiteouts, if you will, or blackouts, brownouts from the dust in the air. And you're 100% right, or 1,000% right.
Well, thanks, Pete.
We start we start going back to that. We're going to end up with a whole lot of worse problems.
Well, we have to take a break, and when we come back, I promise you, the audience, that I am going to get Pete really revved up. I promise you. It's coming, and we'll do it right when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio, 147, Sirius XM. And welcome back to RealAg Radio, broadcasting here from Alltech One. We are fortunate now to be joined by the CEO of Alltech. It is Dr. Mark Lyons. Mark, for some of the listeners in Canada and the U.S. that have heard of Alltech but aren't totally familiar with what those products are, talk about that.
We focus on how do we deploy sustainable solutions for agriculture. So mainly through nutrition, whether that's crop nutrition or animal nutrition. That's kind of the area that we understand the best. Our background is in microbiology, so we've worked with all sorts of different types of fermentation to produce these types of technologies. But ultimately what we're trying to do is how do we improve the health of that animal, that crop, end up with something that we're not having to use as many chemical interventions, And we're really aligned with the future and really where consumers are already getting to today, and regulators as well. There's so much conversation around sustainability. We've got to be able to measure what we're doing, reduce our impact, but at the same time produce more nutrition, which is ultimately what the population needs.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Agronomic Monday. Making the most efficient use of your dollars spent on crop nutrition is a constant goal for farmers. Alpine recognizes this hurdle, trying to bring about economic balance with ever-changing environmental conditions. Alpine developed the Maximizing Fertilizer Efficiency program to solve this yearly dilemma. You can find out more by contacting Alpine at 1-800-265-2268. And I am joined here on Agronomic Monday by Peter Pete Johnson. Now, Pete, leading into the break, I did promise the audience that I would get you absolutely fired up. I don't mean to trigger you and get you going, but when I saw this report the end of last week, I thought of you immediately, because this is the kind of stuff that you and I like to chat about. And coming off of the last segment, we talked about, what if we were forced into tillage? One way to do that is moving people to farms to organic, and that's removing tools like glyphosate off the market. Well, there was a report put out last week, and it's from Aimpoint Research. It's from Aimpoint Research. And Greg Dowd, who's chief economist with Aimpoint, he said, while markets would adapt to a world without glyphosate, it would be a substantial economic cost to farmers and cause the rapid release of greenhouse gases, reversing decades of conservation and sustainability gains. And this is like a what-if report, but I'll tell you, the numbers in here are pretty staggering.
So, Shaun, it's just a good grief. What is it about glyphosate that it just seems to be the lightning rod for everybody to shoot at? And how many scientific studies do we have to have that says glyphosate is safe? Now, every chemical, I don't care what it is, man, if you drink too much water, it will kill you. So everything has its point where it becomes a problem. At the use rates we use glyphosate, it is an incredible tool. Without glyphosate, we would not have no-till. We would not be able to do so many of the things that we do in terms of soil management and trying to capture carbon. Now, you and I have talked about capturing carbon. That's sort of a rabbit hole we shouldn't go down here because it's a whole different discussion. But regardless, man, if you want to do less tillage, if you want to stop the erosion, glyphosate is one of those absolutely critical tools that we need in that toolbox. There's other herbicides, but I grew up in the era of no-till developing. And until glyphosate, and until it was at a price that you could afford, it just was not possible. It just was essentially impossible, and we just know how much healthier soil is if we can avoid wrecking the aggregate stability that we generate by using tillage. And so always, we have to do some tillage. I wish we didn't. I'm a real no-till advocate, but even Johnson once in a while does some tillage when he has to do it. It's another tool in the toolbox. But you take glyphosate out of that picture, and all of a sudden you're always doing tillage, and that is just erosion, not only from wind and water, but from tillage erosion, which is in many jurisdictions, tillage erosion is 10 times worse than wind and water erosion combined. And just like why is it that people seem to focus on that so much? And you can find, Shaun, I don't care what you want to support, you can find a scientific study somewhere that will support it. So you have to look at the bulk of the science. And when you look at the good science, how many people have done those things? I'll get off my pedestal because you're right. You fired me up, but it is one of those things that just drives me nuts.
I agree with you. What is it about glyphosate? Totally. I'm right there. I asked that question too. So since 2016, this is just since 2016, okay, Pete? The study says there's been a 13% reduction in water soil erosion. There has been a 16% reduction in wind soil erosion. There's been a 22% reduction in sediment loss. There's also been 1.2 million fewer tons of CO2 emissions. 32.495 million tons per year of additional CO2 captured by farmland soil. Some other numbers for you to chew on here is that farmers would, if glyphosate was removed from the market, farmers would see 2 to 2.5 times increase in input costs due to limited supply and higher prices of alternative products. U.S. agriculture would, this is just U.S., okay, this is a U.S. number. U.S. agriculture would see increased tillage and decreased cover crops, potentially leading to the release of up to 34 million tons of CO2. That's the equivalent of 6.8 million cars or nearly 36.5 million acres of forests. What the heck are this? Seems like the cost benefit here, it seems outrageous, especially with when a lot of the health claims that are being made about what just a limited amount of glyphosate could cause, which are, like you said, there's been so many studies. It just seems ridiculous at this point, but it just won't go away.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, and the problem, I forget who said it, but it might even have been Mark Twain who said it. It is much easier to fool the people and to convince them that they have been fooled. And unfortunately, too many, and once you make your mind up that glyphosate is bad, trying to change someone's mind about that, Shaun, is virtually impossible. Like it just truly is virtually impossible. And when you quote those numbers from that study, immediately, the scientist in me, Shaun, immediately says, well, what are the assumptions? Are those real numbers? But regardless of whether I agree with the final amount, I think it's double, I think it's half. It's still a massive impact. And why would we go there? By the way, glyphosate is not a perfect panacea. Man, we are fighting all sorts of glyphosate-resistant weeds because we've overused glyphosate. But again, that's a management thing, and it's still such a tool in the toolbox that it continues to be just a constant frustration in my life, to the point where you just go, man, I'm tired of fighting that battle, but you got to keep fighting it because it's such an important tool.
Now, let's move on to some more agronomics here. So last year, we were all revved up. We were all ready. Tar spot was coming. We didn't see the infection levels that we were worried about, which is a good thing, I might add. I'm not disappointed we didn't have any tar spot. But this year, 2023, may be a little bit different. There's some pretty ideal conditions lining up here for this to be a year of concern. What have you been seeing?
So far, Shaun, and I haven't talked to Albert Tenuta. He's the pathologist here in Ontario. He's the guru of tar spot here in Ontario. I know it's further south. I believe it's somewhat in Indiana now. As of Saturday, we had yet to find tar spot in Ontario, and that's the latest in the last 3 years. But remember, most of June for the majority of the province was super dry. That drought has broken, not everywhere. Like, my gosh, you go east of Toronto, it's still like a desert east of Toronto in many areas. But in the tar spot hotspot down in Elgin County, where it first started, it takes 7 hours of leaf wetness to generate an infection. And the more leaf wetness you get, the more humidity you get, the faster that disease ramps up. It's just been the last 10 days, 2 weeks in some areas, but certainly the last 10 days for most areas has been a tar spot heaven for tar spot, not for the farmer. And I expect that it could just explode in Ontario. I hope I'm wrong, but man, if it doesn't, we will be scratching our heads as to why it didn't.
Yeah. Now, last year, remind me, what were the conditions like leading into last year to the tar spot season? Was it less than ideal or was it ideal?
Oh no, last year we had great moisture up until almost June 1st. And it was June 4th maybe or something like that the tap turned off. And on my farm, from June the 4th until August the 5th, or somewhere in that range, I'd have to go, memory's a little fuzzy, right? But it's in that range, we had almost no rainfall. It takes 7 hours of leaf wetness to get tar spot to really start ramping up, to get that initial infection. And then every day that you get 7 hours of leaf wetness, it is just multiplying. Well, last year, we were talking about 20% relative humidity in late June, early July, and you could walk through a corn crop at 9 in the morning and not get a drop of water on you. So that big problem we thought was coming just evaporated because we didn't have the right conditions. Remember, with disease, it's always the disease triangle, right? The crop, the pathogen, the weather. We had the crop, we had the pathogen, we didn't have the weather. This year, since it turned, the humidity has been horrendous. I walk wheat fields, and at 1 in the afternoon, I'm getting soaked to the waist. This year is totally different.
Well, it's because the yield loss from bad infected fields can be very severe, right?
50 bushels per acre, quite easily.
Oh, that adds up.
Yeah. Yeah, even at today's prices, 50 bushels per acre is still just crazy. So pay attention, scout, listen to Wheat Pete's Word, or go to Field Crop News, wherever you get your agronomic information. Go there, listen, scout, stay on top of it. It's not one to fool around with.
Well, and the other thing that we've been seeing as of late is, and now believe me, there are some areas that would like the big white combine to roll through, some of the real drought, areas that have really been impacted by drought. But I'll say it again, there is nothing worse than having a good crop and then it's hailed out. It is such a struggle. And did you see some of the footage? There's been hailstorms all over the place, but I think it was Colorado. Crazy hail.
Yeah, so I did see some of those tweets, Shaun, and around Denver, they said they got like 4 hailstorms in a row, I think the tweet said, and the fields were white, the hailstones were floating in the rain down the stream along the side of the road. The hood of the car of the reporter, it just looked like a moonscape. It had been so dented by the hailstones, and the corn out there, like we talk about sticks in the field, there was a couple of sticks left in the field, but a lot of the field didn't look like there was ever any corn there at all. And that's crushing. That's just crushing.
And there's nothing you can do about it. There's no like special sauce to spray on your crop to create a shield, like as if we're fending ourselves against fusarium head blight or something. Or the previous conversation of tar spot, there's literally nothing you can do. All you can do is have hail insurance. That's basically it, right? Like, what else are you going to do?
No, exactly. If it's available, hail insurance is not even available in Ontario. So some places can't even get that.
Why is there no hail insurance in Ontario?
So it's because it just hasn't been a big enough problem in the past.
See, you're so lucky. Look at you guys.
We do live. People that live in Ontario are very lucky from a weather standpoint, Shaun. Absolutely. We whine and complain like everybody else, and we do have areas with 8 inches of rainfall in the last week. the beans are really taking it on the chin. Down in Essex County, tile run beans, those beans in between the tile run are, they're liable to be your 15 or 20 bushel per acre beans at the end of the day if they survive at all. So we get our fair share of weather problems, but hail is really one of them. We do get hail, but it's not the same as you would get in Western Canada.
Yeah, they can be brutal and damage to buildings and it's pretty aggressive stuff. Hey, Pete, thank you so much for joining me here this week for Agronomic Monday. Always enjoy it. Have yourself a great week, okay?
Yeah, you as well, Shaun, and get the crop out of the field for the people in Ontario. If you get the chance, go, go, go.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, well, hey, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to hear a product spotlight with Pride Seeds right after this.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with Pride Seeds, and we're joined right now by Sara Meidlinger. She's a market development agronomist for Alberta and Western Saskatchewan for Pride. Sara, great to have you back.
Thanks so much, Shaun.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about, we're going to compare growing corn silage versus grain corn and some of the agronomic practices, the similarities, and there are some differences to take in consideration as well. So let's start with the similarities. What are the similarities?
So I guess the main thing is really to grow good feed, you need to grow good corn. So your weed control needs to be bang on if you're growing grain corn, if you're growing corn silage. Your fertility is going to be the same. So if you're one of those growers that side dresses when they grow grain corn, you probably want to consider side dressing when you're growing your silage corn as well. Another thing that we don't necessarily always think about way out west here is your fungicide application. So it's really important to, if you are in an area with high disease pressure, to consider having a fungicide application. Just like for silage corn, we're taking that whole plant. So if we can maximize our yield by keeping those leaves nice and clean, they don't contribute a lot, but they do contribute to yield. So that's definitely something to consider. Just like we would spray a fungicide on our grain corn, we want to do that for our silage corn. And another thing with that is you're going to help protect that ear, right? We want to avoid getting any diseases in the ear that might lead to mycotoxins, which could affect our overall feed out and our animal health. All your planting practices are really quite the same. 2-inch planting depth, planting into moisture, that's all going to stay the same.
Okay, so Sara, that's the similarities. Now let's talk about some of the differences. This is where we really need to pay attention so that we don't make a mistake out there in the field.
Absolutely. So differences might come in your population. So usually we're targeting about 32 to 34,000 when we're planting our grain corn. And what we might do for silage, it could go higher or it could also go lower. So if we go higher, we might just really be trying to maximize that overall tonnage per acre. So we might bump it up to 36, 38,000 plants per acre. On the flip side of that, we might actually plant a little bit lower, closer to 28 to 30,000 plants per acre in order to maintain that late season plant health. So if you have a lot of disease risk, Gauss wilt, gray leaf spot, corn leaf blight, rust, we're going to plant them at less plants per acre. So we just can reduce that overall disease pressure. And especially with silage hybrids or a dual purpose hybrid, you're going to have a bit more leaf matter than maybe you would on a grain corn hybrid. And then also on a lower population, you might be able to manage the dry down a little bit. You might be able to get away with a little bit quicker dry down depending on your hybrid or your growing area.
So Sarah, am I okay to go with kind of that one of those hybrids that could be a grain hybrid, but also it's okay for silage, or should I choose one or the other?
No, Shaun, you can definitely go with what I'd call a dual purpose hybrid. So that could be a hybrid like a 4939 or a 7373. And these are hybrids you can plant, and you can go into the season thinking, oh, I'm going to harvest this for grain, get a bit of a drought. The mother nature doesn't really cooperate. And then that's where you can go in and silage it. Or if you just need a little bit extra, you can take, let's say half the field for silage and leave the rest out. So that's where a dual purpose hybrid really comes in handy.
Okay, so if I'm thinking about straight, like I know I'm going silage, I'm not going to go the dual purpose. What hybrid would you recommend?
So in that case, I'd recommend a silage specific. For the area I cover, AS 1047 RREDF is my go-to hybrid. It's very popular, and it just offers a bit more of a wider harvest window, slower dry down, and it can just help you manage your harvest, especially when you have a lot of acres of corn silage to get, or you're waiting on a custom chopper. That whole plant moisture to get it in your pit is really critical. So those silage specifics can help manage that while still producing high yields and high quality silage.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to fungicide. Does it make sense to use a fungicide on silage corn?
Yeah, I think it does, depending on your area. If you are in an area with high disease pressure, absolutely, I think it's worth it. If you're not. Maybe if you're doing a lot of corn on corn, you definitely just need to kind of see what each year brings. And I think it could definitely pay off in the long run, just to keep that overall plant health up and to reduce your risk of any ear molds in your ear.
Want to remind everybody that Pride Seeds is one of the sponsors of our long-running Corn School. You can find all of the great episodes by going to cornschool.com. Sarah, if somebody wants more information on Pride Seeds' portfolio and the lineup of hybrids, where do they go?
They can go to prideseeds.com, or they can reach out to their local market development agronomist or regional manager.
Awesome stuff. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this quick break.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
I want to encourage you to join Chatsworth's Farm in the county of Vermilion River on Saturday, August 19th for their 4th annual Alberta Open Farm Days. Meet the family behind the farm, take in the artisan market, live music, a barbecue, farm tours, and engage with the local farming community as they celebrate agriculture in the province of Alberta. Learn more by visiting chatsworthfarm.ca. In agronomics, when we're trying to solve a problem, sometimes we got to get creative. We got to look at the same problem through the lens of different solutions. And one of the big problems when it comes to canola is flea beetles, is one example for sure. Well, what if we could actually help ourselves in the battle against the flea beetles, and they're yield robbers for sure in the springtime? What if we could do that through some different kinds of technology and different kinds of modes? I'm not talking modes of action, just different methods, okay? This is a recent Canola School that Kelvin Hepner filmed out in Manitoba. You can find more episodes of the Canola School by going to canolaschool.ca. The Canola School is brought to you by BSF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. Here's Kelvin talking to Chris Manchur of the Canola Council of Canada about RNAi technology.
Pleased to welcome Chris Manchur, agronomy specialist with the Canola Council of Canada. And Chris, prior to joining the Canola Council, you actually did your master's on a topic that I think canola growers across Western Canada will be quite interested in. Producers of all crops, I think, would be quite interested in. That is RNA interference technology. Can you explain what RNAi is and the concept, how it could apply to canola?
Yeah, so RNA interference, or we call it RNAi for short, comes from this very ancient pathway that all organisms almost have. And this was a pathway that they actually used to communicate with each other for defense responses. So some people took, some really brilliant scientists actually had the idea, what if we could actually use this to help protect our plants from a variety of pests, such as like insects, pathogens, or even viruses? So to get a better understanding of this, we kind of have to think about where we are at in the pesticide industry right now. And right now, almost all of our pesticides, they took a look at inhibiting proteins, or enzymes. And so you design a certain molecule, and then it inhibits something inside the organism, and then it dies off. So that's on the protein side. But when we think about how molecular biology works, it goes from DNA to RNA to protein. So RNAi just takes it one step backwards and starts targeting the RNA in that pest organism. So
this could potentially be used to protect plants against specific insects, specific fungal diseases, all kinds of things that cause us issues when we're growing a crop.
Exactly, yeah, because the active ingredient is actually an RNA sequence that we can tailor it to any kind of organism. So every organism has its own set of sequences for that are unique to that. So we can engineer them to target specific canola pests such as flea beetles or even sclerotinia. And there's actually been a lot of research already starting to take a look into that as well.
Okay, so RNAi, this would be a product that you apply with your sprayer on the crop, or it could also be integrated into the genetics of the plant itself. Is that accurate?
Exactly, yeah. There's kind of two different pathways we can take for this. We got a foliar application where we actually spray them on just like any other kind of pesticide, or we can actually create transgenic plants that actually express these sequences inside them themselves. So once that pest organism goes and feeds on it or ingests anything, it'll automatically take that in.
Okay. You mentioned flea beetles. The last few years there's been situations in parts of Western Canada, I think, where growers have been looking for a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to managing flea beetles. Is that RNAi, is that part of that light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, this is just another tool in the toolbox along with proper management techniques and our current insecticide regimes. RNAi, we could potentially see, transgenic plants that could be resistant to flea beetles, or we could spray, this almost new mode of action onto them to help either supplement our current insecticides or be an alternative to that.
Okay. So the big question then is, how far away is this technology, and what are the obstacles or the hurdles it still has to clear when it comes to regulatory and all the other approvals that would have to be in place, checks and balances that have to be gone through before we can actually be using it on commercial field?
Yeah, so we'll start with the good news a little bit. Manufacturing these molecules is now actually just as cheap or even cheaper than traditional pesticides, so that's a really big plus. The other things too are that we've seen efficacy in a lot of different organisms. This has been studied for, a couple decades or so now. But yeah, the big hurdles now are a lot of these field tests to make sure that these formulations actually work in real-world settings. We need to find the right kinds of additional chemicals to make sure it sticks to the plant, to make sure it gets into the insect or that pest. And then also the regulatory aspect of that, being that it's very environmentally friendly, that it degrades in the soil and water very rapidly and is only toxic to the pest that we're targeting. that should be pretty favorable in a regulatory sense.
Okay. There is already an example in the U.S. of RNAi technology being applied in corn, I believe. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So there is an event that we can see it actually being a transgenic one against the western corn rootworm. So that's a really big plus. And then we also see some other companies that are taking a look at it as a topical application for, say, bees to protect them against varroa mites.
Okay, so that goes back to what you were saying in terms of positive environmental aspects to this as well. What kind of issues are there in terms of persistence or potential issues that we see with other traditional pesticides when it comes to environmental exposure and those types of things?
Yeah, so going back to as RNAi is species specific and sequence dependent, even if it does persist in the soil or the environment, it isn't going to impact anything other than the organism that we're targeting for. But also on the bright side, because RNA is somewhat unstable outside of its protected environment, say inside a plant, when it comes into contact with, say, a lot of moisture from, say, rain or in our waterways, or in the soil through the microbiome there, it'll actually get readily degraded and become just harmless and, yeah, be great.
Okay, so you don't see any major obstacles on that side of things?
No, not at this point. I mean, it's we haven't seen anything in the literature right now to suggest otherwise, I'd say.
What about the social aspect when it comes to the approval of new technology? Of course, we have many examples in our food system of technology and society being wary of new things on that front.
Yeah, so I think it's always good to keep a progressive mind looking forward towards new technologies for this, especially ones that really complement all our kind of sustainability objectives, whether it's for the environment, for the economics, and also the social implications that we know that we're applying products that are actually good for all of us involved.
Okay. Finally then, Chris, the big question, do you have a timeline on how soon farmers in Canada could see this technology?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because, it could take a few years to, up to a decade or so. I mean, I'm very optimistic that we can see it in, 5 to 8 years, but I would say we keep on marching along with the research right now, and knowing that we have a lot of priorities for major pests like flea beetles, like in this field, I really like to see this advance more.
Yeah. Any shout out to your former research colleagues? I know some of them are at the University of Manitoba just down the road here.
That's right, yeah. Dr. Mark Belmonte and Steve Wiard, they were my mentors during my master's degree there, and they've worked on research with sclerotinia. It's what I worked on, and overall very positive environment there, and they're doing some great stuff.
Cool. Well, we're definitely following as these developments come closer to a field near us, I guess. Thanks for your time, Chris.
Kelvin asked Chris the question, how long till some of this is available? My response in my head was not soon enough. If this kind of technology can work, boy, would it play a major role in assisting us in some of the challenges we face agronomically. And it could definitely be a new tool. We don't get a lot of new tools added to the toolbox. So to have a new tool like this, wow, that is very, very fascinating. Great work by the researchers, and great to get an update there from Chris Manchur from the Canola Council of Canada, who was obviously heavily involved as a part of his master's project in this kind of area and this kind of technology. Very, very fascinating stuff. Well, we covered a lot of ground here today. If you have any feedback at all on our program here on RealAg Radio, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across the different social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, as well as Threads. Yes, as if we needed another social media platform. Yes, we are on Threads. I'm on Threads too. See you over there, everybody. Or you could call the RealAg feedback line. It is 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.